Welcome to On the Issues. I'm Phoenix Councilman Jim Waring. Joining me today is Arizona's Secretary of State, Michele Reagan. Secretary Reagan, welcome to the show and thanks so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Oh, we're thrilled to have you on. You won your election last November. You and I served together for a fair amount of time in the legislature. You first got elected in 2002 to the House, and then you were a senator right up to your election as Secretary of State. So you've had a long public career already, worked a lot on election issues. So now you're in the top election job. You want to talk a little bit about some of the things you focus on in this office?
Well, you know, it's interesting you say Secretary of State and then you talk about elections, because indeed that's a very large component of the job, is being the chief election officer in the state. But it would probably surprise you a number of the other duties that the Secretary of State has. I won't go into all of them in detail, but just to kind of give you a really quick overview, libraries, and including the state law library, archives, the state archives of the state publications, and all the communications that go back and forth between the House and the Senate in Arizona and Congress. All of that goes through a clearinghouse, so to speak, which is the Secretary of State's office. The address confidentiality program, which keeps domestic violence victims safe, that's housed in the Secretary of State's office. Can you imagine that sports agents need to be registered in the state of Arizona? We can decide whether you like that or not. I don't know that it's necessary, but those registries are kept at the Secretary of State's office. It's just a vast office, a trademark, trades names, apostilles, notaries. So the elections division, it's one division of about 8 at the Secretary of State's office. So it's a very big office. I love every minute of it, believe me.
Well, you've got a broad portfolio there. Asked sort of a leading question with the elections, but just in general, how are you finding the job? Are you enjoying it? Is it everything you thought you'd be?
Oh, it's everything I thought it'd be and more. It's great, and our election division is just a wonderful staff. In fact, we're having, this is a big, even though we're not in election season right now, of course, well, you are in the city of Phoenix, but statewide, you wouldn't think that this is election season, but it is for us at the Secretary of State's office, because we're preparing for the presidential preference election, which is, it's in March of next year, so less than a year away, which takes a lot of time to prepare for. We're going through and upgrading all of our systems. We are writing what's called an election handbook, and that might sound boring, but it's not, because it's actually the manual that will determine how elections are run across the state for the next 2 years, commonly referred to in court cases. Whenever there's disputes, they always say, well, what does the election handbook say? That's written by the Secretary of State's office. This is a really big time in the election world. We've got a couple of cases before the U.S. Supreme Court, so that's a big deal. Doesn't always happen. So if you're a kind of an elections junkie like I am, this is a really big time in the elections world.
Well, you talked about the presidential preference. Now ours is in, if memory serves, late March. Is that correct for next year?
Yes, it's in March.
What do you happen to know off the top of your head? Sort of what are we in the top 10, the first 10? What?
We're earlier than
yeah.
quite a few other states. So yes, and we should get a little bit more attention, I think, than some of the other states. I would personally like to see, and it won't happen this time, but I personally would like to see more states on the western side of the United States combine together and kind of have a Pacific or a mountain states day where we all perhaps have our primaries on the same day, kind of make the presidential candidates have to really come out here and court us a little more, so that perhaps Arizona and some of the western states aren't flyover states. So sometimes Arizona doesn't, I don't think, get the attention that perhaps we should get. Yeah, we are actually, we're not at the end of the pack as far as date-wise by any means.
Well, that's why I wondered, because I didn't know, expect all the candidates to come here, sort of who we're competing with. So it sounds like you're expecting a lot of activity, or at least more than maybe we'd seen in the past.
Well, the candidates obviously go where they think that there's going to be the most electoral votes, and then also where it's going to be more competitive. And of course, we're still deemed, fortunately, or for me, and you, we're still deemed a red state. So we're not considered purple, and so we're not going to have as much activity as some of the other states are going to have.
Well, you talked about some of the other functions of the office. Are there things that you're really hoping to achieve outside of elections that you're really trying to dig in on in those other areas? Absolutely,
and I'm glad you asked. You know, one of the biggest areas in our office is the business services area, and it's actually the largest division in our office. And right now, let me just give you an example. Let's say you wanted to file a trademark, trade name, and all that goes through the Secretary of State's office. Right now, if you were to file one of those, you'd have to come down to the Secretary of State's office and you'd have to file it in person on paper. And until March, you would have to pay for it with either cash or a check. So the first thing I did when I got there is I said, you know, the fact that the Secretary of State's office doesn't accept credit cards needs to change. So we upgraded our systems to allow us to take and be able to accept credit cards. But that was really just the beginning of where I want to take the office eventually. And we're getting there fairly rapidly. And that is that you, as a business person or as a citizen, you should be able to stay home and file those papers, or stay in your business and file those papers when it's convenient for you and not when it's convenient for me. So if you have a trademark or a trade name that you need to file, or if you need to file what's called a UCC, a Uniform Commercial Code filing, which many law firms and many banks have to file on a regular basis, you should be able to file those from your place of business online, complete the paperwork, click send, and never have to come down to the Secretary of State's office. We're getting there. We just put notaries online, the ability to do that, some of that paperwork online last month. And you're going to start to see those kind of things from the Secretary of State's office. It is the year 2015. You should be able to pay with a credit card. You should be able to file these things online. Other states have this and have had these in place for a while. And I'd like our state to catch up. We're also doing this in the elections division as well. You know from being a candidate that you come down to the Secretary of State's office and you pass
Made that trip several times,
papers over the counter, and a lot of the forms are still on paper. Those again need to be transitioned onto online filings. It's good for not just the candidate, because again we're serving the public. It's better for the public because then guess what? They get to look online and look up those forms online, because transparency is where it's all at, and people want to see what we're doing. They want to see what you're doing. They want to see what I'm doing. They can't look up those forms if they're on paper. Well, they can. They just have to come down and make copies of them, and they shouldn't have to do that.
So the forms that you and I traditionally used to go down to the Secretary of State's office, pick up, fill out in handwriting, return, and everything, that's all online now?
Not all online, no, but slowly transitioning online. And of course it takes time, money, energy, sweat equity, which whatever our office is willing to give, we're working overtime to make sure that we can get as many of those processes and projects online and as quickly as possible. So I've got my IT department working overtime. We've got, we've asked the legislature to help us out with what they can do, and then we're also asking, what kind of partnerships we can form with different business entities too, to help out on some of these projects. So we're having, we have a multi-prong approach, and we are really excited at some of the progress we've made. We've got a new program coming out, and we hope fairly quickly. It's part of the way done, but we really want to get it expanded, and we're hoping that when I tell you about it, we're hoping that the City of Phoenix will join along with us. But that's our Follow the Money project, and this is a campaign tool that's aimed at transparency. And just like how I was mentioning to you, we're trying to put business services online. Right. We're trying to do that for campaign and election services as well. And the Follow the Money project is, and you're a perfect example. I'm I keep wanting to call you Jim, but Councilman Jim.
You can call me Jim. We've known each other a long, long time.
But, you know, right now, when we're talking about transparency and when we're talking about who's contributing what to what kind of candidates and what kind of groups are out there, right now, if you want to look up and see who contributed to, let's say, my campaign, it's all there, but you kind of have to hunt and peck and look at it and kind of dig for it. The Follow the Money project is going to be where you'll be able to go to our website and you'll be able to click on a candidate's name. So you'll be able to click on Michele Reagan, a bubble will pop open, and everything there, all the names will come up of all the people who have contributed to me along with the dollar amounts. So you won't have to go digging. It's just laid out nice and neat for you. And then you might see a lobbyist listed in there who's contributed to my campaign. See a name that's familiar, and if you click on that name, another bubble will pop open, and all of the people that that lobbyist has contributed to will be listed. And then you might see some names in there that look familiar. Click on those names, and another bubble will pop open of people that they've contributed to. Again, you'll be able to follow the money. Now, what's interesting is that only takes you so far because my system only lists people, statewide offices and legislative offices, so people who've been in the House and the Senate. It doesn't list people who run for city council, people who are county office holders, like my dad, who's a justice of the peace. He's not going to be listed in there because he files with the county. So what we're proposing is that in time, as soon as we get this all built out, that all candidates, not force cities, but we would ask that cities and towns and counties use this program. So rather than you filing with the city, your campaign finance, you would file with the Secretary of State's office. And then all of that information is going through one portal. So when you click on a lobbyist's name and that bubble pops open of who's contributing, who he or she's contributing to, all of the people.
So it wouldn't just be state offices, right. It would be county and city as well. I think that's an excellent idea.
Jim, when we talk about and when we hear from the public that they want transparency, if you really want to talk about true transparency, you can't get at it unless you're talking about combining all the jurisdictions we have in the state. The system as it stands,
and I'll use a technical term, is a little hodgepodgey. So it's just kind of, you got to go searching around all over. We run our own system, which I've always found curious. But
well, not just that, every city and town runs their own system, and all 15 counties run their own system. So we literally have over 200 different systems in the state. And yet, we hear these calls for transparency, and I get that and I understand that. Yours in Phoenix is actually pretty up to date and pretty modernized. But think of some of these small cities and counties and towns. If you wanted to go look at, and I'm not going to pick on any city or small city or town, but if you wanted to go look at some of these, what's happening in some of these city council races in outlying areas, I mean, they don't have the money for the system that Phoenix has. So we're hoping that once we build it, and like I said, we're in the process of building it now. We really like the way it's coming along. That places like City of Phoenix will look at this and say, this not only serves our candidates better, but it serves your citizens better because it gives them a full picture. And
it sounds dramatically more efficient. Just having one receptacle of this.
We think your city clerks are going to like it.
I agree. I agree. Well, and as a city as someone who's always pushing the city to save money, that might also work for us.
Once we get there, we're going to need an advocate on the city council, and we just think it's a win-win for everybody. And of course, we'll let you keep your audit authority and your finding authority because we don't want that at the Secretary of State's office. What we want is the data. So it's very exciting. We've got projects like that going on in all different divisions that, again, one of the things that I did in the legislature, and I know you did too when you were in the Senate, and we served together, is we looked at things as business people, and we took a business approach to how we can solve problems. And it's no different. As soon as I was elected Secretary of State, it was, how do I take this office and apply a business approach to it?
Well, it sounds like you got some exciting things you're working on.
Yes, we're thrilled.
I mean, is there anything else you want to talk about that you're really focused on right now? Because we were going to talk about a little bit about, voting. We still have, at the city, we have, frankly, very low turnout. Unfortunately, we have the off-year elections, which I've sort of railed against, but my side did not prevail in court on that subject. But young people specifically, you know, it's harder to get them to turn out. There was sort of a blip, I think a little bit of an uptick in the 2008 when President Obama ran and appealed, you know, to younger voters. But generally speaking, it's just harder to get them involved. Do you have any thoughts about that? I know it's something that you've worked on.
We have a lot of thoughts about it, and it's very sad, I think, when we go out and see the numbers, one, of the turnout, especially in that 18 to 35-year-old demographic. I know you see it as a candidate, too, when you're out there trying to get them excited about voting, and they just want nothing to do, one, with voting. But I think more important more troubling is that age demographic doesn't seem to want anything to do with community. And we find that more troubling. What we've started to do is, and we have a voting rights ambassador at our Secretary of State's office that's new under my administration. We're working in the schools, but we have kind of taken the approach that if we're talking to somebody at 18 years old and explaining to them for the first time about registering to vote, we're getting them too late. That doesn't mean we're not going to talk to them, because of course we want to be talking to everybody, but we also want to be focusing on children when they're, you know, 11, 12, 13, and discussing with them the importance of having their voice heard and what it is like to be a voter. Why is that important? So if they can grab onto that idea at an earlier age, then they can carry that with them. And when we bring in actual voting machines and vote, you know, the counting, the ballot tabulation machines into the schools, and let them actually have an election and debate about something, and then mark real ballots, and we bring real ballots that we've had printed just for them, and they get to feed them through the machine, and they get to see that their voice and their debate translates into an actual count, a tabulation. We hope that sticks with them, that voting isn't just something, you know, you just go do and you just mark, you know, names on it. It means something. It means a voice. The kids get really excited about it, so we're hoping to continue doing that with the younger kids. And then when they turn 18 and somebody says, you know, make sure you register to vote, it's exciting, because it's not exciting to the kids we talk to now that are 18. It's like pulling teeth. And the other thing too, I'm going to steal your sheet of paper here for a second, but if we are asking people, and this goes for a lot of age groups, especially the 20-year-old crowd, but if we're asking people to register to vote on a piece of paper with a clipboard, we're doing it all wrong. Because
it's old school,
really,
to be sure. Yeah.
They look at us like we're crazy. So we're transitioning over everything to tablets and the way we're communicating with people. Even when we're out at fairs, when we're out in group settings, we're talking to people with tablets now. So, you know, I know when you and I were coming up in the ranks and stuff, you know, it was clipboards and paper.
It's a lot of paper. That's why I remember a lot of paper.
But really, you go up to somebody with a clipboard now and a couple sheets of paper, they are not going to stop and talk to you. So it needs to be all queued up and ready to go. So again, it's that process of transferring everything online. You can have your paper back.
I can have my paper back? Well, I appreciate it. Because it's got the next question on it.
Oh,
I need to ask. Yeah.
I should have looked to see what it was.
Yeah, we've been cheating. So you launched a new website, Arizona Votes. You want to talk a little bit about that and how that's going?
Well, you know, first of all, we're very excited about the website name that we were able to get, Arizona.vote. We think it's a lot easier for people to remember. The old website name still works and will continue to work. Couldn't get rid of those .gov names if you tried. But they're hard to remember when you're out talking to people, and especially if you're out registering people to vote, or if you're a volunteer and you say, go to the Secretary of State website where you can change your voter registration. There's links to do all these great things. But go to www.azsos.gov. Really? Go to Arizona.vote. So much cleaner, so much easier to remember. And then we're also really excited that we were able to get the name Arizona.voto. So that is currently in Spanish, but with the Google translator, which is kind of dicey, could be kind of iffy. So we're hoping that we're able to have that translated the proper way. And of course that takes a little bit of time and money. So we're in works with a few folks on that. So, but to be able to have people be able to go to Arizona.voto, and everything's there in what is perhaps maybe their first language is great, because remember, the Secretary of State's office isn't just about elections. It's about business services. It's about domestic violence programs. It's where we've got.
They could be looking you up for a lot of other reasons besides voting.
Yeah, and so it needs to be available in whatever format people need to be able to utilize it. So that was really important. So Arizona.vote, very easy to remember. Either way is going to take you to the same website, and it's new and it's improved. It's fresh. It's easy to navigate. It's mobile friendly. Go figure. And very easy to just find things on, we think. And we're always soliciting feedback. So we ask that anybody who goes to it, if you're having a hard time finding something, any voter information, any campaign finance information, anything about business services, any of the links, if something doesn't work, let us know. Because again, we need to, if it's not working, we need to get it fixed. So Arizona.vote, check it out.
I have to ask this next question, switching gears slightly. So you served in the legislature, now you're Secretary of State. Having served in the legislature myself, people always ask, well, which do you like more, or whatever, having transitioned to the city. So what's the biggest change for you? I mean, you're used to working with 90 folks, now you're running your own office. I mean, it is, I would imagine, considerably different.
Oh, it's very different, I'm sure, as you saw too. I mean, you go from having all these people, not just around you, city, I can't even imagine what the difference between the city is and the state. I obviously have a lot fewer issues to focus on. The legislature was 1,000 issues, and you crammed them into a couple hours.
I've tried to explain to people, it could be anything. It's like being back in college, they just throw stuff at you and you got to learn it. So.
And people would ask me, I talked to my parents on the way home after the legislature, and they would, how was your day? And you couldn't explain it. Because how do you explain to somebody, I talked about underground storage tanks, and then I talked about park funding, and then we switched gears and I talked about Supreme Court cases, but that was only for 15 minutes, because then I had to go to a meeting on, pick any topic under the sun. I mean, and it was all at lightning speed. That's the legislature. So obviously, my job as Secretary of State is a lot more focused, a lot more tailored. And so I enjoy that. It's also statewide. So I'm traveling the state a lot more, whereas legislature was just district. I had to focus on Scottsdale and Fountain Hills. And this is focusing on what's good for folks in Yuma and folks in Winslow and folks in Phoenix. So it's the whole state. So you can't even compare.
How many employees in the Secretary of State's office?
Nearly 160.
160, wow.
So yeah, it's 160, and roughly about $20 million passes through the Secretary of State's office. So
it's a much bigger operation, clearly, than running a legislative office.
And you know, that office that you visit down at the Capitol on the 7th floor, I would be remiss if I didn't tell you there's 11 locations around the state. So some of them are big buildings and libraries and museums, and where all the archives are kept. We have a state archivist. She's amazing. If you ever get a chance to go over there and meet her and see the actual state constitution, and they wear gloves, and it's all kept at a certain 55 degrees, and I mean, it's just amazing, some of the stuff. We have a whole building that stores the official archives of the state. We have something called the Talking Book Library, which is on 32nd Street and the 202. It's not a library that you can go in and check books out. It's a library staffed by volunteers that read books into audio files for use for the blind. I mean, it's unbelievable. Now there's employees there too, but the majority of it is run by volunteers. That is a huge division. I mean, when I first got to be Secretary of State and I was looking through the books, I'm like, let's talking books, you know, because who knew?
Right.
And it's big. They have their own building and they're all this their own equipment and.
Well, it's fantastic if volunteers are willing to do that too.
Right. They have a lot of volunteers. In fact, when I went to go to their award ceremony and they thanked their volunteers for all the hours that they put in and all the work that they do, even fixing these machines that the people use to listen to the books. I mean, it's an unbelievable operation is what I'm saying. Huge operation. Just, again, did you have any idea? After 12 years in the legislature, I had no idea.
I will confess, I did not.
Yes, there were just all sorts of things like that. So,
yeah. Well, it's fantastic that you're going to work on issues that you focused so much time on when we were both in the legislature together. I remember this was your thing. And
it was election and business.
Yeah, elections and business.
Thing.
Yeah, those are your two big things. So you're now in the job that can really affect those and really have an outcome. You know, we talked about the young people, we talked about the website, obviously trying to get more people involved. I think that's a goal for both of us. We started off as volunteers and Young Republicans way back when.
And you know, the Young Republicans are starting up again, so I think things are cyclical, and I'm hoping that this means that...
In the interest of bipartisanship, Young Democrats too, we just want people to participate.
Right.
That's what we want to do.
Well, and we're starting to see more energy in Young Democrat groups too, because I mean, there weren't a lot of Young Democrat groups or Republican groups when we were in the legislature, although prior to us being in the legislature, there was like 200 people in our Young Republican group, and there was a very robust Young Democrat group as well. So, and
that seemed to have faded over time.
Well, maybe this will be there. Maybe that means there will be hope for the 18 to 35-year-old voting crowd. I can't think that we were the only ones that were kind of.
It felt that way after a period of time. You're like, what happened to all these groups? So hopefully they'll come back, and hopefully people get excited, and then they'll carry them through really their whole lifetime, because it's important for people to get out and participate, as you well know.
Yeah, and it's also important to you now that you're especially a parent, that you're showing your children how, you know, important it is to not just to become a voter, but also, again, go back to community, to be a part of the community. And I'm sure your children are going to get that because of all the stuff that you do in community, but that disconnect, I think, is what's so important, that people are starting to recognize and to see that there's a huge disconnect between these young people and what they think of government and what they think of elected officials. Sometimes I meet people and then they find out I'm Secretary of State, or they used to find out I'm a senator, and they'd be shocked. And I'm sure you got that too, and they'd say, well, you're so normal. I mean, what did you think a senator would be? You know, not normal? Like they were shocked because we were young.
I drive a CRV now, but I used to drive a Camry, and people would be like, well, that can't really be his car. I never understood, what do they think you're going to be driving? You know, it's
a spaceship,
it's a strange,
apparently.
we're old taxpayers who got involved, so, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't, and you have a minivan now?
CRV, yeah, little, yeah.
Oh, you're getting old.
Not kidding. I am already there, unfortunately, as the gray hair can tell. But Michele, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate this, Madam Secretary, you making time in such a busy schedule, all the employees and everything you're doing in the office.
Well, we look forward to working with the City of Phoenix on more initiatives that anything that will increase voter turnout, increase activity. Again, bipartisan. It does not have to be partisan at all, obviously, and ways that we can increase that activity and excitement around getting involved in community.
Well, when some of these things reach fruition, then we're going to have you back on and talk about some of the ways we can partner up.
Have me before your council.
We will do it. And if you have any questions or comments, please call my office at 602-262-7445 or visit my website, phoenix.gov/district2. We look forward to seeing you next time on The Issue.